My name is Lily Caldwell. I was 31 years old when I returned to St. Louis after 5 years away, carrying a wrapped retirement gift and one foolish hope that my family might finally be glad to see me. The party was being held inside Union Lantern Depot, the century-old railway station my mother had spent 12 years restoring before she died. I entered through the side doors just as a slideshow appeared above the stage. The first photograph showed my parents with my sister beneath the words, "The Caldwell Legacy, built by 3 generations." I had been removed from every picture. Even the childhood photograph that once showed me holding my mother's hand had been cropped at my shoulder. Then my uncle spotted me. "Well, look who finally crawled back. The family failure." My sister lifted her champagne glass. "Life's been quieter without you." My father did not hug me. He looked at the gift in my hands, then at the tables filled with bankers, city officials, and former colleagues. "Don't ruin my night, Lily. You want to stay? Shut up, sit down, and pay the bill. It's the least you can do after 5 years of being a disappointment." The invoice beside him showed $38,000. I smiled, placed my gift on the registration table, and said, "Fine, this is the last time you'll ever see me." I walked out before anyone noticed that I had taken a photograph of the document displayed beneath the retirement cake, a document bearing my dead mother's signature, dated 11 months after her funeral. 1 week later, I made a move that froze every account connected to the depot. Last night, an old family friend texted me, "Where are you? They're losing it. Please call." Before I tell you what my father said, and what happened after I walked away, tell me what time it is, where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story has traveled. I did not drive back to my family's house that night. I checked into a small hotel near Forest Park, locked the door, and placed my phone face down while it filled with messages. My sister accused me of creating a scene. My uncle sent a payment request for the party. My father wrote only 6 words. "You embarrassed me for the last time." 5 years earlier, a message like that would have made me apologize. That night, it made me open the false document I had photographed. It was labeled an amended property agreement. According to it, my mother had transferred her ownership of Union Lantern Depot to my father and waived every right previously placed in trust for her daughters. The signature looked convincing from a distance. It did not look convincing to me. My mother always looped the final letter of her surname beneath the line. This signature ended in a straight, nervous stroke. More importantly, the notarization date was almost a year after she had died. I had spent the previous 5 years working as a forensic auditor, examining falsified deeds, concealed loans, manipulated trusts, and business records designed to look ordinary. My family believed I had disappeared because I was ashamed. In reality, I had built a career finding the exact kind of lie they had placed beneath a retirement cake. Still, I did not call a lawyer immediately. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the only object I had taken when I left home: my mother's brass recipe box. It held no recipes. 3 months before her death, she had used it to store letters, restoration invoices, and sketches for the depot. I had never examined the false bottom because doing so felt like admitting she was gone. That night, I pressed the warped corner and lifted the thin wooden panel. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to me. The letter began, "Lily, if you are reading this, someone has made you doubt your place in this family. Do not let them confuse obedience with love. The depot does not belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the trust I created for you and your sister. Your father may manage it while he lives, but he cannot sell it, mortgage it, or remove either of you without unanimous consent." Beneath the letter was a copy of the original trust certificate and the name of the attorney who had prepared it. My mother had also written one disturbing sentence in the margin: "Thomas has begun asking me to sign blank pages." I refused. For years, my father had told everyone that I abandoned the family after my mother died. The truth was more complicated. During her final months, I discovered that money intended for the depot's community programs had been redirected into accounts controlled by my father. When I questioned him, he called me unstable and accused me of exploiting my mother's illness. My sister believed him. My uncle told relatives I was trying to steal the depot. After the funeral, my father gave me an ultimatum: withdraw my accusations or leave. I left because I had no proof, and because grief had hollowed me out. I spent 5 years wondering whether freedom was worth losing everyone who shared my blood. Now I had proof that my mother expected trouble. The next morning, I contacted Evelyn Brooks, the attorney named in the letter. She was no longer practicing full-time, but she remembered my mother immediately. When I emailed her the photograph from the party, she called within 6 minutes. "That amendment is impossible," she said. "Your mother never signed it." "I still have the original trust ledger." Evelyn explained that the depot had been placed in an irrevocable preservation trust. My father was only the managing trustee. My sister and I were equal beneficiaries, but neither of us could sell the building without the other's written approval. Any mortgage required consent from the Preservation Board and both beneficiaries. I asked why no one had contacted me. "Because 4 years ago," Evelyn replied, "your father filed a statement claiming you could not be located. Your sister signed it as a witness." My stomach tightened. They had not merely excluded me from photographs. They had legally erased me while knowing exactly where I lived. My father had sent birthday insults to my current address. My sister had mailed me an invitation to her engagement party 2 years earlier, and then publicly mocked me for not attending. Evelyn searched the county records while I remained on the phone. 20 minutes later, she found 3 loans secured against the depot. The most recent was for $2.4 million. The lender was preparing to release another $1.1 million after my father's retirement, supposedly for structural renovations. Yet no major renovations had occurred. "Where did the money go?" I asked. "That," Evelyn said, "is what we need to discover." For the first time since leaving the party, I understood the terror beneath my family's cruelty. They had not wanted me silent because I was a disappointment. They had wanted me silent because my signature was the only thing standing between them and a crime they had already committed. 2 days after the party, my sister called and used a soft voice I had not heard since childhood. "Lily, Dad was overwhelmed. Come to dinner. We can talk privately." I knew it was a trap, but traps sometimes revealed more than honest conversations. I agreed to meet them at Union Lantern Depot the following evening. Before I arrived, Evelyn arranged for copies of the trust records to be secured and advised me not to disclose everything we knew. I wore a small recording device permitted under Missouri's one-party consent law, carried no original documents, and sent my location to a colleague. The depot's main hall had already been cleared after the party. Only my father, my sister, my uncle, and my sister's husband waited at the long walnut table my mother had commissioned from salvaged railway timber. My wrapped retirement gift sat unopened beside my father. He did not invite me to sit. "You made your point. Now tell us what you want." "I want to understand why Mom's signature appears on a document created after she died." My sister's face changed before my father answered. "It was only a flicker, but I saw it." My uncle leaned back. "You always did love accusations." I placed a printed copy of the amendment on the table. "The notary date is impossible. The trust number belongs to a different property, and the signature was copied from a grant application Mom signed 7 years earlier." My father laughed loudly, but his fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "You disappear for 5 years, come back with some fancy job, and suddenly you think you're a detective. I am a forensic auditor." The room went still. My family had apparently never bothered to learn what I did for a living. My sister recovered first. "You review spreadsheets. Stop pretending you're an investigator." "I trace financial fraud for courts, lenders, and insurance companies. That includes forged property transfers." My father finally opened the gift I had brought to his retirement party. Inside was a framed copy of my mother's original sketch of Union Lantern Depot. On the bottom, in her handwriting, were the words, for Lily and Michelle equally. May neither daughter ever be made a guest here. My sister pushed the frame away as though it could burn her. My father looked at me with an expression I had once mistaken for authority. Now I recognized fear. He said the amendment had been prepared while my mother was still alive and filed late because of an administrative mistake. My uncle claimed the notary had entered the wrong year. My sister insisted she had signed the missing person statement only because no one knew whether I planned to return. Their explanations contradicted one another within minutes. Then my father changed tactics. He stood, walked to the projector, and displayed a collection of my private messages from the year my mother died. They were messages I had sent to my sister while exhausted, frightened, and grieving. In one, I wrote that I wanted to disappear. In another, I said I could not continue fighting Dad. My sister had saved them for 5 years. This, my father announced, is why Lily was removed from the trust. She was unstable. She abandoned her responsibilities. My sister's husband stared at the screen. My uncle smirked. My sister would not meet my eyes. That was the moment I understood how carefully they had constructed the family story. They had taken the worst month of my life and turned it into evidence that I deserved nothing. They had used my grief as a legal strategy. My father continued. Your mother knew you couldn't be trusted. She asked us to protect the depot from you. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked one question. Then why did you forge her signature? He slammed his palm against the table. Because somebody had to save this family after you ran away. The words echoed through the empty hall. My recording device captured every syllable. My uncle rose quickly. That isn't what he meant. It sounded clear to me. My sister stepped toward me. You have no idea what we sacrificed. Dad's reputation, my career, the events business. We built everything around this building. You don't get to walk in and destroy it. You used trust property to finance your business? She hesitated. It was enough. I looked at the menus still stacked near the bar. They carried the logo of Michelle Price Events. The depot had hosted dozens of weddings and corporate receptions under her company's name. If she had used the property without paying market rent, the trust had been deprived of income. If loan proceeds had funded her business, she was more than a witness. I asked my father where the $2.4 million had gone. My uncle moved between us. Meeting over. My father pointed at the doors. You are no longer my daughter. Do you understand me? Whatever happens next, you caused it. When your own father denies you in the building your mother preserved for you, what are you supposed to protect first? The family name or the truth? I picked up the framed sketch. You erased me from the photographs, the accounts, and the trust records, but you made one mistake. You assumed being gone meant I had stopped learning. As I reached the doors, my sister called after me. Nobody will believe you. I turned around. I don't need everybody. I need the original ledger, the bank transfers, and one honest witness. At that moment, her husband looked away from her. The next morning, Evelyn and I submitted an emergency petition to suspend my father as managing trustee, preserve the financial records, and stop the pending loan. We did not file a simple claim for my share of the depot. That would have allowed my family to portray the dispute as a greedy daughter demanding money. We presented evidence of potential forgery, self-dealing, concealed debt, and misuse of trust assets. The judge issued a temporary preservation order within 48 hours. No sale, mortgage, transfer, or withdrawal connected to the depot could proceed until the court reviewed the records. That was the move that left them speechless. The lender froze the unreleased $1.1 million. The depot's operating accounts were restricted. My sister's event company lost access to the building because she had never signed a valid commercial lease. My uncle's brokerage was removed from a confidential sale listing he had created for the property. My father's retirement celebration had not marked the end of his career. It had been scheduled 1 week before he intended to sell the depot to a luxury hotel developer. The sale price was nearly $9 million. My mother had prohibited any private sale for 75 years. Once the preservation order became public record, my family attacked me everywhere except the courtroom. My sister posted that an estranged relative was trying to destroy a community landmark for personal profit. My uncle contacted former classmates and told them I had returned because I was bankrupt. My father called members of the preservation board and claimed I suffered from untreated mental illness. Anonymous emails were sent to my employer accusing me of stealing client data. They expected shame to drive me away again. Instead, each attack became evidence. My employer confirmed that the anonymous emails contained information only my family would know and preserve their digital headers. Evelyn sent cease and desist notices. We documented every public statement that contradicted the court records. I did not respond online. Silence frustrated them more than anger because they could not use my words against me. 3 days later, my sister's husband contacted me from an unfamiliar number. His name was Daniel Price, and until that week, I had assumed he supported everything she did. He asked to meet at a diner near the airport. Evelyn came with me and sat at another table. Daniel looked as though he had not slept. Michelle told me the depot belonged to your father. She said the trust ended when your mother died. What changed your mind? At the meeting, you mentioned the loans. I manage our household finances. I had never heard of them. He placed a flash drive on the table. It contained invoices from Michelle's company, bank statements, and emails between her, my father, and my uncle. The documents showed that my father had transferred nearly $900,000 from the depot renovation account to companies connected to my sister. Some invoices listed work that had never occurred. Others charged the trust for floral installations, destination travel, designer furniture, and personal credit card bills. Daniel had also found an email discussing my forged consent. My uncle had written, "Lily hasn't answered family calls in years. Use the old signature from the insurance form. Nobody will challenge it before closing." My sister replied, "Make sure Dad destroys the draft after the bank approves everything." Daniel said he confronted her after our meeting. She admitted she knew my signature had been copied, but insisted the money would be replaced after the sale. When he threatened to contact an attorney, she told him he would lose access to their accounts and never see their daughter without a court fight. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I watched your father use your grief to humiliate you, and then I realized Michelle has been doing the same thing to me. I don't know whether this destroys my marriage, but I know what happens if I stay quiet." The flash drive changed the case. It connected the forged documents to the hidden loan, tied my sister's business to diverted trust funds, and showed my uncle expected a 6% commission from the secret sale. Yet the most disturbing file was a scanned medical authorization signed during my mother's final hospitalization. The form gave my father temporary authority to pay her medical expenses. Someone had altered the final page and inserted language granting him control over all trust transactions. The witness signature belonged to my sister. When Evelyn asked whether I wanted to pursue criminal charges, I could not answer immediately. My sister and I had once slept in the same room during thunderstorms. She had braided my hair before school. She had also helped transform our dying mother's medical authorization into a weapon against me. There is a point where loyalty stops being love and becomes permission. I had reached it. "Send everything required by law," I said. "No threats, no exaggeration, no revenge outside the evidence. Let the records speak." That evening, the family friend who had texted me called. She said my father was screaming at everyone, my uncle blamed my sister, and several former colleagues had withdrawn their support from the hotel project. Then she asked me to call him before he did something desperate. I refused. He had 5 years to call me as a father. I'm not answering now because he needs me as an accomplice. My father demanded a family meeting before the preliminary hearing. Evelyn advised me not to attend alone, so we met at a conference room in her office. My father arrived with my sister, my uncle, 2 cousins, and a retired pastor who had known our family for decades. They had turned a financial negotiation into a moral intervention. The pastor opened by saying families sometimes had to forgive imperfect decisions to protect future generations. My father sat with folded arms, performing wounded dignity. My sister wore no wedding ring. My uncle carried a folder labeled settlement. He offered me $400,000 to surrender my interest in the depot, withdraw the petition, and sign a confidentiality agreement. The number sounded large until Evelyn placed the independent valuation on the table. My protected share of the property exceeded $3 million before accounting for diverted income. My uncle shrugged. Your share is worth nothing if the building collapses under debt. You helped create the debt, I replied. My father leaned forward. Take the offer and walk away. That is what you're best at. The pastor quietly asked him to lower his voice, but my father no longer cared about appearances. He said I had resented my sister since childhood, blamed him for my failures, and used my mother's death to build a career centered on suspicion. Then he announced that I was not truly part of the Caldwell family because a daughter who leaves is only a relative by paperwork. For years, those words would have broken me. That morning, I simply opened my mother's letter. I read the sentence she had written for both daughters. Home is not a reward for obedience. It is the place where neither child must earn the right to exist. My sister stared at the table. My father said the letter was sentimental nonsense and could not override business reality. No, I said, but the trust can. Evelyn presented the settlement terms we were prepared to accept. My father would resign as trustee, provide a complete accounting, return misused funds through the sale of his personal investments, and cooperate with an independent investigation. My sister would surrender control of all depot events, repay unauthorized transfers, and issue corrections to the false claims she had posted. My uncle would withdraw from the sale, waive his commission, and disclose every communication with the lender and developer. The depot would remain protected and be managed by a nonprofit board. My uncle laughed. You think you can take everything? I'm offering you a chance to return what was never yours. My sister finally spoke. What happens to Dad's house? The question revealed what she cared about. My father had pledged his home and retirement accounts as secondary guarantees for the fraudulent loan. If the lender accelerated the debt, he could lose both. I told them I had not demanded his house. The loan documents had created that risk long before I returned. My father pointed at me and shouted, "Do not pretend your hands are clean. Your mother would hate what you've become." I almost answered with anger. Instead, I asked him why he had displayed the forged amendment at his retirement party. He looked confused. You wanted everyone to see that you owned the depot, I continued. You wanted the city officials, bankers, and developer to believe the sale was legitimate. You used Mom's name as decoration while violating every instruction she left. My sister began crying, but her tears were not an apology. She accused me of destroying her business, her marriage, and our father's health. She revealed private details from my past, including therapy I received after our mother died, hoping the relatives would see me as unstable. One cousin shifted uncomfortably. The other asked why therapy after a parent's death should disqualify anyone from owning property. The room changed after that. My family had expected a vote against me. Instead, the cousins asked to see the financial records. The pastor requested a copy of my mother's letter. Daniel, who had been waiting outside with his attorney, entered and confirmed that my sister had threatened him after he discovered the transfers. My father stood so quickly that his chair struck the wall. He called Daniel a traitor. My uncle accused my sister of keeping poor records. My sister screamed that everything had been my father's idea. Within seconds, the united family that had condemned me began exposing one another. My sister said our father ordered her to sign the altered medical form. My uncle said she created the false invoices. My father claimed my uncle arranged the forged notarization. Each person tried to save themselves by handing the others to the fire. I watched them and felt no triumph, only clarity. Blood had never been the force holding them together. Secrecy was. Before leaving, my father looked at me and said, "When this is over, You will have a building and no family. I lost this family years ago, I replied. The difference is that I finally stopped blaming myself. The pastor asked whether reconciliation was still possible. Reconciliation requires truth, I said. They came here with hush money. No agreement was reached. The hearing would proceed. The preliminary hearing drew more attention than I wanted because Union Lantern Depot was a protected landmark. Local reporters filled the back row. Representatives from the lender, the preservation board, and the proposed hotel developer attended. My father entered wearing the same dark suit from his retirement party, as though dignity could be restored through repetition. My sister sat behind him with her own attorney. My uncle no longer sat with either of them. Their strategy was simple. They portrayed the disputed documents as administrative mistakes, the diverted funds as legitimate business expenses, and me as an absent beneficiary who had suddenly returned for money. My father testified that he believed my mother wanted him to modernize the depot and that I had rejected every attempt at reconciliation. Evelyn asked him to identify one letter, email, or voicemail inviting me to participate in the trust. He could not. She showed the court birthday messages he had sent to my current address while simultaneously filing statements that my location was unknown. She displayed the forged consent beside my verified signature. A document examiner explained that the forged version had been digitally lifted from an old insurance form. Bank records traced loan proceeds into my sister's company and then into personal expenses. My uncle's emails documented the secret sale and his expected commission. Even then, my father remained composed. He claimed subordinates had prepared the documents and that he signed them without understanding the details. He blamed his age, his grief, and the pressure of preserving the depot. Then Evelyn called a witness no one in my family expected. Marjorie Ellis, my mother's former hospice nurse. Marjorie was 74 and walked slowly to the witness stand. She testified that my mother became alarmed when my father repeatedly brought financial papers into her hospital room. On one occasion, he asked her to sign several blank pages. She refused and requested that Marjorie photograph the documents. Marjorie had kept the photographs because my mother feared they would disappear. One image showed the original medical authorization before the false trust language was added. Another showed my father removing papers from my mother's bedside drawer. A final photograph showed my mother holding a handwritten note. Lily must not be removed. Contact Evelyn if Thomas pressures me again. My father's expression finally broke. His attorney objected, but the metadata confirmed the dates. Evelyn then played part of my recording from the depot meeting. My father's voice filled the courtroom. Because somebody had to save this family after you ran away, he had admitted that the signature was forged. His argument was no longer that no fraud occurred. His argument was that he believed fraud was necessary. The judge suspended him as trustee, appointed an independent receiver, invalidated the amendment and unauthorized mortgages, and referred the suspected forgery and diversion of funds to the county prosecutor. The pending hotel sale was terminated. Because the lender had failed to verify beneficiary consent, it could not seize the depot itself. However, it retained claims against the personal guarantees signed by my father, my sister, and my uncle. The consequences arrived quickly. My father's retirement accounts were restricted pending the financial accounting. He resigned from 2 civic boards before they could remove him. The credit union where he had spent 36 years announced an internal review of transactions he approved near retirement. My uncle's brokerage suspended his license while regulators examined the concealed sale arrangement. My sister lost 3 major clients, not because I contacted them, but because they discovered her company had submitted false invoices to a charitable trust. Daniel filed for legal separation and sought temporary protection of their shared finances. The receiver's audit later found that more than $1.3 million had been diverted over 4 years. Some money funded my sister's company. Some covered my father's investment losses. Nearly $200,000 had gone to my uncle through consulting fees for work that did not exist. The court ordered the sale of several personal assets to begin repayment. My father's house was eventually listed because he had pledged it as collateral. My sister sold her downtown office and moved her company into a small rented space, but the business did not recover. My uncle's partners removed his name from their firm. They had wanted revenge to look like me storming into their lives and taking everything. The truth was less dramatic and more devastating. I presented the records, and the structures they built collapsed under their own weight. Outside the courthouse, my father approached me without his attorney. Cameras waited across the steps, but he spoke quietly. "You could have handled this privately. I tried 5 years ago. You wanted to punish me. I wanted the forgery stopped. You destroyed your sister. She signed documents that erased me." His jaw tightened. "Your mother would have forgiven us. My mother tried to protect us from you." For a moment, he looked old rather than powerful. I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said, "You'll regret choosing a dead woman's building over the living people who raised you." I answered, "I chose the truth over people who demanded that I disappear." He walked away, and I understood that regret does not always produce accountability. Some people would rather lose everything than admit the person they mistreated was right. A year later, Union Lantern Depot reopened under an independent nonprofit foundation. The main hall became a public exhibition space. 2 former waiting rooms were converted into studios for local artists, and the old ticket office became a free financial literacy center for young adults leaving foster care or unstable homes. I requested that the center teach basic contracts, credit, inheritance rights, and fraud prevention. I knew how easily people could be controlled when they were taught that asking questions was disrespectful. The foundation offered me the role of executive director. I declined. Reclaiming my mother's legacy did not mean I had to spend the rest of my life trapped inside the conflict surrounding it. I accepted one seat on the oversight board and continued my auditing career. The building belonged to its purpose, not to my ego. My mother's framed sketch now hangs near the entrance. Beneath it is a small plaque bearing her words, "Home is not a reward for obedience." My relationship with my family did not heal neatly. My uncle never contacted me again. His license was eventually revoked after a separate investigation uncovered similar undisclosed commissions. My sister sent 3 messages during the first year. The first blamed me. The second asked whether I would help her avoid repayment. The third arrived on our mother's birthday and contained only one sentence. I knew the signature was wrong, and I signed anyway. I did not rush to forgive her. I replied that accountability had to come before reconciliation. I told her that an apology without honesty, repayment, and changed behavior was only another request for access. Months later, she entered a settlement with the trust and began making scheduled repayments. Whether we will ever become sisters again, I do not know. My father lost his house, though he was not left homeless. He moved into a modest condominium purchased with funds legally protected from the loan claims. Friends who had praised him at the retirement party slowly disappeared. Several had admired his influence, not his character. He pleaded guilty to reduced financial charges after cooperating with investigators and received probation, restitution requirements, and community service rather than prison. Some viewers might believe that was too lenient. At first, I did too. Then I saw him at the depot's reopening. He stood across the street, beyond the crowd, staring at the restored windows. He had spent years telling people the building was his achievement. Now his name appeared nowhere except in archived court records. He did not enter. He did not approach me. He remained outside until the ceremony ended, then walked away alone. That image gave me no joy. For months after winning, I expected relief to feel like happiness. Instead, I grieved all over again. I grieved the father I had hoped would choose me over his pride. I grieved the sister who had converted my most vulnerable messages into ammunition. I grieved the 5 years I spent believing I was difficult, selfish, and unworthy of belonging. Revenge did not return my childhood. The court could restore my legal rights, but it could not make my family safe. Winning did not erase the cost of standing up. It simply ensured that the cost was no longer mine alone. Therapy taught me that boundaries are not punishments. They are the conditions under which relationships may continue without destroying you. I stopped measuring forgiveness by how quickly I allowed people back into my life. I began measuring it by whether I could remember them without surrendering my peace. I also learned that resilience does not always look fearless. Sometimes it looks like reading the document everyone tells you to ignore. Sometimes it means preserving evidence while your hands shake. Sometimes it means walking out of a retirement party without defending yourself because you finally understand that the truth does not need to win every argument. It needs the opportunity to be examined. My family called me a failure because I refused to become useful to their deception. They said I abandoned them because admitting they pushed me out would have exposed the system they created. For years, I thought reclaiming my mother's legacy meant forcing them to acknowledge my worth. In the end, her real legacy was the knowledge that my worth never depended on their acknowledgement. Blood can create history, but it cannot guarantee safety. A family name does not excuse humiliation, fraud, manipulation, or silence. Standing up for yourself may cost relationships you once believed were permanent, yet preserving a toxic connection at the price of your identity is not loyalty. It is self-erasure. I still have my mother's brass box. Her letter remains inside, though I no longer read it when I feel uncertain. I do not need permission from the dead to live freely, just as I no longer need approval from the living people who tried to diminish me. On the first anniversary of the depot's reopening, I stood beneath the clock in the main hall and watched teenagers attend a workshop on financial independence. One young woman asked how to recognize when a relative was using love to pressure her into signing something. I told her genuine love allows questions. Genuine love does not punish you for reading before you sign. Genuine love does not demand your silence to protect someone else's reputation. As she wrote those words in her notebook, I finally understood why my mother had hidden the letter from me. She was not asking me to avenge her. She was reminding me not to become smaller for people who benefited from my silence. I came home after 5 years expecting a family reunion. Instead, I discovered a forged signature, a stolen trust, and a room full of people who had already rehearsed a life without me. They believed rejection would send me away forever. They were almost right. But when I walked out that night, I did not leave as the family failure. I left as the only person willing to stop the lie. And perhaps that is the hardest truth about toxic families. Sometimes the person they call disloyal is simply the first one brave enough to become honest. So where should the boundary of family be drawn? At shared blood, shared history, or the moment someone repeatedly asks you to betray yourself just to remain included?
Thank you for watching the story until the end. Everything in this video is fictional and created only for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminds you that sometimes life shows you who people are not to make you bitter, but to make you wiser. Once you understand and listen, you can stop repeating the same pain with different faces.